Well, good morning. Good morning, FCC. Good morning to the Disciples class. It is Sunday, the 27th of September. We're still waiting on those fall temperatures to arrive, or at least I am. I'm ready for a cold winter. That's what I'm hoping for. So hopefully October will bring us some change in the weather. Nonetheless, I'm glad you are here. I'm glad you're going to be spending some time with us this morning in Bible study, just thinking through some wonderful words that are going to come to us from Psalm 37. So grab your Bibles, turn over to Psalm 37, great Psalm of David. Grab you something, a tea, a coffee, something that's really pink. This is dragon fruit. If you're wondering what I have, that's my dragon fruit superfruit smoothie. So I go back and forth between dragon fruit and acai berry. So that's what I have this morning for our Bible study. But find yourself a comfortable spot, grab your Bible, grab you something to drink. If you're a note taker, grab you a pen and paper, make notes in your margin. We're going to, again, this week, spend some time just thinking through a psalm that I think has some powerful words for us, hopefully some words of both blessing and challenge that can help us to continue to grow spiritually, because that is what we are attempting to do every single day. Individually and collectively as a faith community, is continue to move forward and grow wider and deeper in our spiritual lives. And so hopefully Psalm 37 will help us a little bit. Let me set this up for you. I don't know if there's any Seinfeld fans who are watching this, but Seinfeld was one of my, it still is one of my all-time favorite shows. Great cast, great band of characters in the midst of that. And there is an episode of Seinfeld in which Seinfeld and George, I guess Jerry and George are negotiating with NBC over the pilot episode of this fictitious show that Jerry is putting together, and they get bogged down in the discussions of money, as so often is the case in so many areas, whether fictitious or real. They are bogged down, and George wants more money than what NBC is offering. And the standard for George's expectation at that time, those standards are based upon the salary of Ted Danson, who was the star of Cheers and was earning somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 an episode. And George wants to know why Ted Danson should make that much more than him. And he screams at Jared, he screams at the executive, and he says, I just can't live in a world knowing that Ted Danson makes more money than me. I don't know if you were a fan of that show. I don't know if you watched that show. I don't know if you remember that episode. But have you been there? Have you been in a spot like that before? It's a tough spot to find ourselves in from time to time. And it is, whether we're talking about a show or we're talking about real life, it is that spot of comparison. And that is a tough spot to be in when we are comparing ourselves and what we have or maybe even what we are in comparison to someone else, and what they have and what they seemingly are. And we look around and we throw up our hands and we scream in much the same way that George did. And we say, it just isn't fair, right? It just doesn't seem fair. Why should fill in the blank have more than me? Why should fill in the blank have more talent than I do, or get that promotion, or have, fill in the blank of whatever those types of things are. I think anyone who has lived life for any length of time has probably felt that from time to time. I know anybody with a job has probably felt that from time to time. And it happens in all areas, and it happens to us at various stages of our life and our life development. And it's tough. It's tough when we are bogged down in that comparison mindset, and it's tough when we feel that we are losing out to someone that we shouldn't, or others are prospering in a way that we feel we should, but yet have not experienced. What that does is it brings on a myriad of emotions, right? It moves us into the areas of bitterness and resentment and anger. Might even take us to rage, right? It can move us there. I think most of all, and maybe at the root of it all, is the idea of envy. The green-eyed monster. Probably you've heard that phrase attached to that as well. That emotion, that captivating spirit that oftentimes can take us over, right? Envy, the green-eyed monster. We say it a softer way, or at least we've come up with a softer way to say that over time. And what we say is, well, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? Same thought process, same situation, same comparison, same envy driving all of that. Envy and jealousy. Envy and jealousy have been associated with the color green since ancient Greece, because it was thought that your tendency toward jealousy and your tendency toward envy could be determined, and this is true, that your tendency toward jealousy and your tendency toward envy could be determined by how much bile you have in your system. It's a true story I'm telling you. And of course, you know what bile is, right? It is the bitter green alkaline fluid that is secreted from our liver. Hope you're not watching this at breakfast on Sunday morning or at lunch on Sunday morning, because we gotta talk it out. But this is where the origin of some of that imagery comes from. And just like bile is oozy and bitter, envy and jealousy will cause us to do much the same. It will cause that same and that same bitterness to come into our life. Bitterness, envy, jealousy. They are enemies that we do battle with, and most likely will continue to do battle with throughout all of our lives journey. But make no mistake about it, they are powerful enemies. Now, I'm a subscriber to the idea that, and I'll take Satan. Let's take Satan for an example, right? Satan is not God. He does not have the powers of God. He cannot do the things that God can do. But he is as powerful as we allow him to be in our lives. And we can grant him more power and more power and more power by opening ourselves up. And certainly there's a number of things, and spiritual warfare is a great topic and conversation that we could most likely get into one of these days. But we afford evil the power oftentimes in our lives. The same is true for bitter, envy, and jealousy. They are powerful enemies, but the power comes from allowing them to have control or take control or have power, right? We're gifting those things power for them to consume us in our lives, for them to rob us of happiness, to make it impossible to enjoy the moment or appreciate the blessings. That's why it's not easy being green, right? We'll throw a couple of these phrases in there. It's not easy. It's very difficult, and it will ruin us if we are not careful. It will ruin us. And we have to go to war, and oftentimes we do go to war every day with that little green monster. It's not fair that he got the promotion and I didn't. It's not fair that she cheated and moved into that success, right? And I played fair. It's not fair that my life isn't better or isn't farther along than where I dreamed that it should be or where I want it to be. It's not fair for my relationship. It's not fair for my family. It's not fair. And the list can go on and on and on and on. And maybe I am just talking to myself on the screen as I record that for us this morning. Or maybe there's somebody who is listening to this as well and finds common ground with me in the midst of that struggle. The good news is we are in good company, because you know who else struggled with this exact same thing? King David. King David struggled with this. King David, who wrote the majority of the Psalms. King David, the man or the boy, I guess at that point, who defeated Goliath with 5 smooth stones. King David, who ruled over the kingdom of Israel. He is intimately familiar with jealousy and envy and bitterness and self-pity. And we see it throughout his life, but we really see it all over the Psalms. We see it in a lot of places in the Psalms. And sometimes he appears to be winning the battle against envy, and sometimes it appears that he is losing the battle against envy. And so I think it makes it extra important to really dial in and download what it is that we're talking about and what it is that he is telling us in Psalm 37. It really is a psalm that serves as a warning against becoming a victim to these things, but it also provides a game plan on how we can overcome these enemies in our life. Let's take a look at Psalm 37. And we're going to look at the first 7 verses of Psalm 37. Do not fret because of evil men, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Now, if you merge that scripture with life and with faith, there are a few things that we need to get right in our lives and in our faith. And I think the first thing that we see here in Psalm 37 is that we need to stay focused. We need to stay focused in on God. Stay focused in on God. Don't be afraid. And I put that word in there because it's not just a matter of staying focused on God. It's staying focused in on God, right? Don't be afraid to zoom in, right? Have you ever heard the story about the man who goes to the doctor and he tells the doctor that everywhere, that his entire body hurts, that everywhere he touches, it is pain. It doesn't matter where it is. It hurts everywhere. And the doctor says, that's impossible. There's no way that can be the case. I want you to show me. And so the man takes his finger and he pushes in on his shoulder. And of course he screams. And then he takes his finger and he presses in on his elbow and he screams even more. And he takes his finger and he touches his knee and he screams out. And in agony, he touches his ankle and he screams out. I mean, everywhere he touched. In the midst of this examination, he is crying out in pain, and he finally looks up at the doctor and he says, "Is it serious, doctor?" And the doctor said, "Not really. because your finger is what's broken. You'll get that. If you didn't get that, you'll get that in just a second, right? Sometimes, I tell you that story to tell you this one. Sometimes we get fixated on the wrong things. Sometimes we get fixated on the wrong things, and envy sets in when we look at the wrong things. Bitterness, jealousy, those enemies against our spirit and our life, they set in when we start worrying about the wrong things. And when our primary focus is whether or not this other person is, for the sake of argument and maybe for the sake of filling in the blank, better than us or has more than us, then when that occurs, when our focus is off and our priority has been reset in that manner, then we begin to lose sight of what is really important in our life. And there are 4 key words and phrases that David uses here in Psalm 37 in reference to our relationship with God. He uses the words trust, delight, commit, and wait. Trust, delight, commit, and wait. I want to share those with you and think through those things with you today, because I really believe those 4 words are key words, and they are keys to really help us define how we relate to God. Trust, delight, commit, wait. The first of that is trust. Trust in the Lord and do good. That's what David said. Trust in the Lord and do good. Sometimes we just can't see how things could possibly work out in our favor. And the more processing time that we give to it, it just seems like it is a waste of time. Because there is no possible way this is going to work out. There's no way to get ahead without cutting corners. There's no way to succeed without compromising. There is just too much competition out there, and it doesn't matter what area of life we're talking about. This exists for all of it. In reality, there's just too much competition out there, and nobody else besides me is playing by the rules. How can I get by? When S. Truett Cathy had the dream and the vision to start this small little fast food chain, or I guess it eventually became a chain. At that time, it was just a restaurant. He was going to call it Chick-fil-A. You probably have heard of that, right? He had the idea that the restaurant would be closed on Sundays. That was part of the dream. That was what he birthed. He wanted to be able, not just for himself, but for all of his employees, to spend the day worshiping with their families and with their friends in their faith communities. And everybody told him it would not work. At that time, malls were a prime location. We actually went to the mall the other day. We had to go in and get something. So we just decided, Neely and I just decided to walk through the mall. Man, times have changed, but you remember a time when it wasn't like that, right? You remember a time when malls were the place to go. You remember a time, maybe it was Furr's or Wyatt's or Luby's Cafeteria after church on Sunday. That was the place to be. And that's where a lot of people went to. And at that time, when he had this idea for this restaurant, and he had this idea that Sundays would be a day of no work, people said that's absolutely insane. It will not work because malls will not rent you space if you are not open on Sunday. And Sunday is one of the biggest days of the week for food industries. And at that time, that was one of the biggest places that people would flock to. And S. Truett Cathy said, "This is important to me. I am not budging on this point. I am going to work hard the other 6 days and trust God to help us succeed in this strategy." And I like that. I like the idea. I like the vision. But I'm going to agree, on paper, it doesn't make much sense. On paper, it looks like a bad idea to be closed on Sundays. But as it turned out, it seems to have worked for S. Truett Cathy and for the Chick-fil-A franchise. My pleasure, right? Trusting God. Trusting. Remember, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the Chick-fil-A sandwich or the French fries or any of those things. Trusting God is what we're talking about. David said, trust the Lord and do good. Trusting God means that you do what is right even when it might not bring maybe the fastest results or most oftentimes the easiest results. Trusting God means that you do what's right even though you might be thinking, I know this is the right thing to do, but I'm not sure how this is actually going to help. Trusting God means that we trust God to balance the scales at the proper time. That's why David says in verse 3, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. He's saying, reiterating, declaring to us that God will take care of us. But we have to trust him and we have to do what's right. We have to get our eyes off of the other, right? Whatever that is, whether that's people or possessions or whatever that might be. We've got to get our eyes off of the other and we've got to get focused in on God. And so turning our eyes back to God, refocusing and zooming in on God is really the first thing that David is telling us to do. Trust, right? Here's the second thing, delight. David says, delight yourself in the Lord. In fact, he makes this very bold promise in verse 4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Sounds really good. It sounds like we should be singing a song, all right? Like that could be a song lyric for one of our worship songs. But what does that mean to delight yourself in the Lord? Delight yourself in the Lord. Here's what I think that means. And certainly maybe you interpret that a different way, or maybe you think about that a different way. So you do not have to buy what I am selling. It's free anyway. So I'm just offering it up. Here's what I think that means. I think that means spending time with God. Spending time with God. Have you heard that phrase, absence makes the heart grow fonder? It's supposed to be true in romance. I am not sure that it is, and I am not sure that that is good advice. I think oftentimes absence makes the heart begin to wander, right? And we begin to, again, whether we're talking about possessions or people or whatever the case may be, the heart begins to wander and we look for something else and maybe someone else who isn't gone all the time. Be it as it may, this certainly doesn't apply to our spiritual life. In fact, in my experience, absence from God or absence in that relationship with God only makes the heart grow colder. When I'm not spending enough time in the presence of God. And oftentimes it's hindsight that I catch this, right? But it always seems to turn out that I enjoy my life less and less. But I find, and I'm sure you find it true as well, I find that the more time that I spend in the presence of God, the more I delight in his presence. Let me say that again. The more time I spend in the presence of God, the more I delight in his presence. And if you want to wage war, right, against bitterness and envy and jealousy and those types of things, if we want to engage spiritually against them, we have to turn our eyes back to God. And that means that we spend time in his presence. If bitterness is getting the best of us, right? If it's getting the best of you, start spending more time with God. I'm not even talking about your bitterness. Go ahead and be bitter, but be bitter and spend time with God. I'm not talking about your envy or your jealousy. Go ahead and wrestle with that a little bit. Go ahead and sit in that. Just go and sit inside of that in the presence of God. Spend time listening to God as he speaks to us in the outdoors. If you were with us on last Sunday, if you're with us today as we are worshiping on the lawn, there is an added experience of just being in God's creation and listening and feeling the breeze and hearing God's creation that is adding to the depth of the worship experience. And so just be in the presence of God, whether that's inside or outside. Spend some time in prayer. It's okay. God can handle your anger. If you need to yell out, David does it quite often throughout the Psalm. So if you are waging war against those things and you are angry and frustrated, it's okay. Our God can handle it. But just spend time in communication with God. Spend time in Bible study with God. Spend time in worship with God. Spend time with other great minds who maybe have written some books that could help redirect some of our thoughts. We live in the day and age of this beautiful device right here. I guess it can be beautiful or evil, whichever way you want to use it. But man, if you haven't dialed into some podcasts, dial into some podcasts and help to reshape and rethink and retool some of the ways in which we are thinking and moving through our lives and thinking and moving through our spiritual life, and let all of that direct you into the presence of God. And the more time that we're spending with him, the more we delight in his presence. So trust, delight. The third key word was commit. That's what David is telling us in Psalm 37. This third key word is commit. He says, commit your way to the Lord. And I don't have a lot to say about this, but when I was thinking through that, one of the things that came to mind was an old hymn that you most likely know, but it's not one that we sing very often anymore. But we used to sing, I have decided to follow Jesus. You know that hymn? I have decided to follow Jesus, no turning back, no turning back. The next verse says, though none go with me, I still will follow. Though none go with me, right? It's this declaration that's happening. I still will follow. No turning back, no turning back. And then that third verse says, the cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning back. Trust, delight, commit. Fourth key word that David gives to us is wait. Wait. He says, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. I think waiting might be the hardest thing. Most of our lives, and I'm confessing that I'm not a very good waiter by any means. And I do realize most of our lives are spent waiting for one thing or another, and waiting for, waiting for a chance, waiting for a moment, waiting for success, waiting for an answer, waiting for a solution to a problem, waiting for relationships and all sorts of things inside of relationships. And much of life is a matter of waiting. And we need to learn to wait not only on the Lord, but we need to wait in the Lord. Or at least we need to learn to wait in the Lord. David said, be still before the Lord. And we need to be striving forward. Maybe we never arrive there, I don't know, but we need to be striving forward to this place where we can say and declare, God, I have done everything I can. It is now in your hands. I am trusting you to move it forward in my life at the right time. and I am going to wait patiently in you for that. Trust, delight, commit, wait. That's really the first step that David gives to us in the midst of this psalm. He gives us a couple of things. Let me touch on them real quick. The second step, maybe in this war against bitterness and envy and jealousy and those types of things, is to unleash our anger. And maybe you're surprised that I said that, but let me say it again. Unleash your anger. Now, I didn't say unleash your anger on someone. I did not say that. But I am saying release your anger and let go of it. Listen to what David said, verse 1. And then we'll look at verses 7 and 8, right? Verse 1 says, do not fret because evil men or be envious of those who do wrong. Verses 7 and 8 say, do not fret when men succeed in their ways and when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger, turn from wrath, and do not fret. It leads only to evil. David says, don't do it. Don't let your anger get the best of you because it only leads to evil, right? It hurts you. It hurts other people. It distorts your thinking. It impedes your judgment. That's why you have to let go of it. You have to unleash it from yourself, right? Every time a bitter thought, every time an envious thought, every time a jealous thought comes to mind, we have to release that. We have to unleash that and let it go. But how do we do that, right? How do we release our anger? I think, first of all, we say to ourselves, and maybe we say in our spirit, with the power of the Spirit of God that is within us. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm not going to keep rolling around like the hamster on the wheel with these thoughts in my mind, right? Maybe the second thing we do is we acknowledge that whether we feel it or not, we know by faith that God is in control and he will balance the scales in time. Because his ways are perfect, his knowledge is perfect, his wisdom is perfect, and above all, his timing is perfect. David will say later on in that psalm, verses 12 and 13, the wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them, but the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. And we need to realize that and however you think about it or whatever you classify in this wicked category, you need to realize that is God's problem and it is not ours. It is God's problem. It is not ours. And we turn that over and we stay focused in on God, trusting, delighting, committing, waiting, releasing as best as we can, releasing that anger from us, so that we can stay focused, trusting, delighting, committing, and waiting. And then maybe the third thing, maybe the third step in this process, if you will, to push back envy and jealousy and bitterness in our lives, practice the spiritual discipline of generosity. Practice the spiritual discipline of generosity. And I know that seems like it may come out of left field, but it wasn't my idea because it came out of left field for David too, because it just seems like out of the blue, David says something about money. Verse 21, right? We're tracking through this psalm and we're going and we're going and going. And then just out of the blue, he says in verse 21, the wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. It's so odd. It doesn't seem like it fits in the flow of what's happening there. So why does he say that? Because there's one mentality that drives generosity, and there is another mentality that drives selfishness. And the mentality, right? The thinking of both mind and spirit that drives generosity says, I'm blessed. God takes care of me. I have all that I need and more because of the goodness of God. And even though I might just have a little today, I know that my God balances the scales. I know that my God sees what's going on. And so I will freely share my life and the things of my life by trusting in God's faithfulness. That is the mentality that drives generosity. The mentality that drives generosity. The mentality that drives selfishness says, today is terrible. I don't have what I deserve, and I better get more as quickly as I can because that is what matters to me. Look for opportunities to give. Look for opportunities to give, whether that's physical or financial. Look for opportunities to give. If you've been blessed, then bless. If you have skills and talents and experiences, then bless the lives of others with those gifts as well. Jesus says in Luke chapter 6 and verse 38, give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap, for with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And what he's saying in that is, when you give with a spirit of generosity, you open the door for God to be generous with you, which is why David says in verse 25 and 26 of Psalm 37, I was young and now I'm old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging for bread. They are always generous and lend freely. Their children will be blessed. Trust, delight, commit, wait, release, be generous. Look for opportunities in which you can engage in those things this week. Maybe if that message is hitting you because you might be struggling with some of those things. You might be in a box of comparison. You might be wrestling around with the enemies of bitterness, envy, and jealousy. Hopefully that's an encouraging word for you. And maybe, and this is the way it works, maybe the Spirit moved in a completely different way than anything that I had planned to say, and you received a completely different word. I am glad that the Spirit moved and you are blessed by Psalm 37 as well. We certainly didn't touch on all of it, so take some time this week and read through it. There's so much goodness in the midst of Psalm 37. I hope this has added to your morning of worship. Whether you have gathered with us in person or you have gathered with us online, or you have just randomly found this Bible study that got posted on social media, on our church website or our church social media page on a random Thursday somewhere down the line. I know that anytime that we open up this word and we spend time thinking through this life that we are living with God, we are always encouraged and challenged and blessed. So until next time, be great, be blessed, and we'll talk to you soon.